Hey, Howard Jacobson here. Welcome to today's Plant Yourself podcast. A quick reminder, this podcast is free for everyone and supported by patrons. So if you would like to find out about becoming a patron of the show and helping us out, helping defray the cost, helping to spread the message, you can do so at plantyourself.com/gift. Thanks so much and enjoy today's episode. Perry Marshall, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
It is great to be here. You and I have known each other for a very long time, and we've reconnected, and it's a pleasure. So
yeah,
it's a comfortable pair of slippers talking to Howie. So
yep, I think last month was our 18-year anniversary since we met.
Yeah, that'd be about right, come to think of it. So I was thinking the other day, like, well, my kids don't know what it's like to know somebody for 20 or 30 years. It's kind of cool. So
yeah. So we've traveled in the same circles. You have been my Google AdWords teacher and mentor. So you gave me a start into a world that treated me very well until I realized that it wasn't the right world for me. And we have reconnected in very, interesting ways around health. And so let's just start by well, you've got a conference coming up.
Yeah.
You're a guy who you got your start like designing audio for cars. You became a sales guy. You became the Google AdWords guy, the 80/20 sales and marketing guy. I know you're deeply religious and you're interested in the intersection of science and Christianity. And you're putting on a conference about cancer. So the Jewish word for this is like chutzpah, but dude, what are you thinking and why you?
Well, so it's not really about me at all. It's about the extraordinary people that have helped pull this together. So last November, James Shapiro reached out to me, and Shapiro is he was mentored by Barbara McClintock, who won the Nobel Prize in 1983. He's a professor at the University of Chicago, and frankly, he's been about 25 to 30 years ahead of the curve in evolutionary biology. And he and I have become friends. I created the world's largest science research prize, the Evolution 2.0 prize, to find what is the origin of information, which is a huge part of the origin of life question. I think it's also, as we'll get into, it's also a central question in the evolution science. And we announced that at the Royal Society a year and a half ago with judges from Harvard, Oxford, MIT. So I have this side career as a science research and funding person. And Dr. Shapiro said, well, I've teamed up with these two other guys, and would you help us put this conference together? And I said, absolutely. In a hot second, I'll help you put this together. Well, the other two guys, one is Frank Laukien. He's a CEO of Bruker Corporation, which makes scientific instrumentation devices, and Henry Heng, who is a oncology researcher in Detroit. And what happened was Henry Heng started writing a book about 15 years ago, and in 2011 it was ready to be published, and one of the peer reviewers threw a fit. And what Heng had done in this book is he had connected the dots between the progression of tumors and the Cambrian explosion and high-speed mechanisms of evolution.
The Cambrian explosion is what?
Is 540 million years ago, there is a sudden, sharp increase in the number of species. In fact, it's 40 new phyla. In basically 1% of evolutionary history, you get 50% of the new of the new developments. Okay, and it's so dramatic that old school evolutionists have tripped all of themselves trying to explain this. Darwin was trying to explain it, and he couldn't. The creationists and the intelligent design guys have had a field day with it. But the reason that evolution can happen so fast is that organisms have an incredibly sophisticated toolkit for adapting. And there were very harsh conditions during that time, including a lot of drought. And so you see this massive proliferation of new body forms and body plans, and you go from simple things like mollusks to vertebrates. And Henry Hang looked at this and he said, purely based on my cancer research, I think evolutionary biology has mostly got this wrong, because I have watched the speciation of tumors progress at incredible speed, and so he formed, really, you could almost say, this whole new theory of evolution. Well, one of the peer reviewers threw a fit, and the book got trashed, and it never saw the light of day. But then he started to figure out, well, guess what? There's a whole group of people in evolutionary biology who have already come to almost identical conclusions. And this is not new. There's huge gold veins of literature about this. And so he and Shapiro got together, and what they said was, you know what? You can't understand cancer until you understand evolution, and you can't understand evolution without understanding cancer. And in fact, cancer is probably the fastest laboratory for understanding evolution. It's way better than looking at fossils or sequencing genomes of all kinds of animals, because cancer is evolution that happens at incredible speed in real time.
All right.
So that's what this conference is about.
Gotcha. So my understanding, I'm going to give you my straw man understanding of Darwinism. And it's not just a straw man understanding. It's the thing that if I disagree with, most of my science literate friends are going to think that I'm a fundamentalist Christian fanatic.
Right.
Right. So here it goes. There is variation, right? And variation is essentially random. And then there's selection, so that, and there's heredity, right? So that if an organism makes a baby or a copy of itself, that copy or baby resembles the organism. And if two organisms get together sexually, then it's a mishmash of both of their characteristics. And through random mutation of genes, new things happen. And then the environment votes yay or nay on whether that thing survives and reproduces. And so based on random genetics and mutation, evolution has occurred. Now, if you say that it's not random, then you must believe in like God controlling everything, and humans, humans are not related to monkeys. And I noticed that you mentioned 540 million years ago, which is already a lot longer than the 4,000 years of the biblical, really, right? So first of all, is that basically evolution? Do I understand orthodox Darwinism the way I just described it?
That is orthodox Darwinism. That's pretty much like if you read a book like Darwin's Dangerous Idea by Daniel Dennett, or The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, that's pretty much what you got.
Okay.
And this is what most people have been taught. It's been drilled into the heads of biologists for the last 75 years. And so, yeah, that is the standard, that's the modern synthesis, the standard model.
Okay.
So you do have the talking points correct.
Okay. And you're saying that cancer doesn't fit this theory? I saw an email you sent out this morning where you had a line that I really like. If the airplane doesn't fly, change your theory.
Right. If the airplane crashes, your theory is wrong. Well, okay. So what Darwin could never really properly explain was, why is it that these new species suddenly appear in the fossil record intact and complete with not very many intermediate forms and sometimes none at all? Like, how is that possible? Which was fantastic fodder for the creationists. And actually, I grew up a creationist, so I was programmed to believe the creationist version of this and go, yeah, I know, yeah, Darwin's a bunch of BS. But I went down the rabbit hole, and what I found was, no, like, you can get very rapid speciation. There's ways to do it. Botanists do it all the time with hybrids. And every cell in existence has tools for cutting, splicing, rearranging its DNA, changing its genetics. And so the version of the story that you told me, so it's sort of right, except it's not random. And the part that's not random is like 90% of the story. And the part that you got right is only about 10% of the story. Okay. And so it's unbelievably fascinating. Like, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, okay, so what would you think if you were like going to evolutionary biology conference? I would have thought, you got to be crazy. Like, why would anybody even be interested in that? Like, I thought that is like such a, well, like the way they describe it, it's so passive, it's so nihilistic and so kind of bureaucratic and boring. Like, who would ever be interested in that? What I found, the real actual science, it totally geeked me out because I'm an engineer, and it was the most incredible engineering I'd ever seen in my life.
Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna go back to the things I still don't understand. I know there's, so you talked about botanists able to sort of recreate this sort of Cambrian explosion through hybridization. Now, when I was in the farthest I ever got was island biology freshman year of college with Robert May, who did, I think he won some Nobel Prize or something, but I didn't understand a word of what he was saying. So I'm not trying to ride in his coattails, but there was a difference between artificial and natural selection. And artificial selection could sped up because it's what humans are doing on purpose. And it sounds like you're saying that it's not that different, that natural selection is also teleological, meaning there's also a purpose behind it and not just random.
Well, if you think about any ecosystem, natural selection is only as smart as all the competitors are. Okay, it's no smarter and no dumber. So how you and I spent years in the trenches together doing Google advertising. Okay, and so Google advertising is exactly like biological evolution. You have replication, variation, and selection. And selection is the marketplace, and you don't get to decide what the marketplace likes. Okay? But the marketplace is made up of what? Other living organisms that also have wants and needs and desires. And so that's why niches, whether marketing, business, ecological, or whatever, are sophisticated. It's because they're inhabited by sophisticated beings, okay? And so natural selection is usually described in this very abstract, ethereal, it basically is given all of the characteristics of a deity, only they're really insisting that there's no deities and there's, but it has all of those things. But then human, okay, so you have human natural selection. Human natural selection is in some ways more directional, because natural selection, like they found this in the Galapagos Islands. So you have drought years and you have lots of rain years, and as soon as the drought years start happening, the population will migrate towards birds that are really good and hardy in low moisture environments, and then when it's rainy years, it swings back the other way, but it ends up like going back and forth across like a center line, where human selection can actually push things very hard in certain directions. But I guess the bottom line is that natural selection is not the driving force. It's just the eliminator. Okay. It just,
Natural selection doesn't cause any of the variations. It just votes on them.
No, in dozens and hundreds of books, natural selection is described in such a way that would lead you to believe that it has some kind of sense of direction, or that it somehow creates something. It doesn't create anything. And this is a major point. So all the creativity has to come from somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So when I think of like natural selection, and this is a sense of how unsophisticated I am about it, I think about cereal with raisins, where the raisins all end up at the bottom. And it's just physics, right? There's holes that they fall through. They're denser.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so is that the environment, and just the question of how much you shake the box?
Well, so like real ecosystems, whether they're in business or biology, like I happen to think that business and biology are very, very, very similar. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the business has to be a subset of ecology because it's about stocks and flows.
Right. It's how that humanity feeds itself. Of course, it's just like biology, right? Mm-hmm. So ecosystems have all of these different participants, right? So you go in the forest, and there's like 200 species of insects, and there's dozens of species of birds, and there's all of these trees and all of these weeds and all of these worms, and they're all like, it's this very complex thing, right? And in business, it's the same thing. You walk into a store is an ecosystem. Like, well, we got our Apple products, we got the Windows products, we got, the MP3 players, right? I mean, so natural selection is, it's an abstraction that in business terms, it's like, well, what did the market really want? And what survived, the culling process. That's all it is.
Okay. So, I mean, so one thing you talk about is you talk about like the individual players at some level have cognition. Mm-hmm. Like I flatter myself to think that I have cognition, mm-hmm. right? Like I have a garden, and I would say, a good 20% of the things that are happening in the garden aren't because I wanted them to happen.
Yes.
Right? There's a lot of things that are happening that I didn't want to happen, and I put a lot of sweat and tears into not happening, but they happened anyway. But like the garden occurred because I had wants, desires, and strategies to act upon them. So are you saying that that organisms, but that's me. That's like I'm an individual. You can understand that an individual elephant or a rat or a fish has programmed cognitions or some sort of consciousness. But is there like a meta consciousness of a species that says, this is okay, things look tough in the Cambrian, let's all do this?
Well, so I don't know how to answer that question on a whole species level, but one of my favorite stories is what Barbara McClintock actually discovered, that won her a Nobel Prize 40 years later. And what she discovered was she was hacking corn plants with radiation. She was like, let's hit a corn plant with radiation. Let's damage its chromosomes and let's see what it does. And she had this idea of what it was going to do. And it threw her a complete curveball, because what it did was it made significant restructuring of itself to repair the damage, and the repairs that it did were completely unique to that plant. Okay, so this would be like This would be like going through your Windows registry on a Windows computer, deleting little random folders and mixing stuff together and corrupting files. And the computer goes, we have a problem here. And it starts rearranging things. And it goes, well, there's a whole file folder here that's missing. And I don't even know what was in there. But here, let's modify this other folder, stick that in there. That should work. And this is what this plant did in real time. Well, I think if you, and she didn't have to kill 100,000 plants to get one that actually did this. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if hardly any of the plants actually died. Maybe some of them did. But one thing's for sure. That plant did not make that repair by accident. It knew at some level what it was doing, and it was anticipating the future in doing it, okay? Which, in my opinion, makes that one of the most significant science experiments in history, because she was the first person to observe an evolutionary change and genetically figure out what happened after it happened. Nobody had ever done that before, okay? And this completely turns evolution upside down, because the plant was an agent of its own evolution. And I maintain that is always the case, and here's why. So let me give you another example. So one of my friends is John Torday at UCLA. He is a pediatric toxicology scientist. He studies the effects of secondhand smoke on children. He has cataloged 300 effects of secondhand smoke. The number one worst effect on the list is asthma inherited epigenetically. So a woman smokes. Her body is like, I don't like the cigarette smoke. It starts doing all of these things. It starts changing its epigenetics, which is the expression of genes. Those changes are made to maintain homeostasis against a toxic threat. The epigenetic changes get passed through her egg to her daughter. Those get passed to her granddaughter. So a little girl who may have been born after the grandmother died and may have never been in a room with a smoker before, has asthma inherited from the changes in her grandmother's body, okay? That is real-time, purposeful, contextual evolution. It's also a inheritance of an acquired characteristic, which for 100 years, the old version of evolution told you was totally impossible and laughable, turns out to actually be true.
Meaning that basketball players get taller?
Well, well, maybe basketball players get taller, but I mean, maybe that's, I mean, maybe, okay, let's pick another example. You play the guitar, you get calluses on your fingers. The calluses are epigenetic changes in your skin. Now, I don't know, please don't misquote me, but it may be possible that the calluses, or the ability to develop the calluses faster, could go to your children so that they could play the guitar more easily. And epigenetics is such a fast-growing, burgeoning field right now. We don't even know what it's capable of or not capable of. But this, once again, this completely flips up evolution upside down.
Right. Now, everyone who listens to my podcast knows, if they're paying attention, that like epigenetics is like the name of the game in lifestyle medicine. But there's still, it feels like there's still a fence around it. Like, well, that's not real genetic changes, right? Because it's still, the genes are the same. They're just expressing differently. I mean, what do you say to that?
Well, those changes can pass through dozens of generations, and sometimes they can become permanent. I mean, what we're talking about right now is at the bleeding edge of science. Now, I mean, I've read a ton of papers about this stuff, and there is no question that epigenetics is a major factor in evolutionary history. It's not like this minor little thing. Okay, and it means that you're not just some passive recipient of your unfortunate genes. Like, the old view is very disempowering. It's like, well, you know, there's this big cosmic lottery. You got what you got. It was all random and accidental. Well, not only can you change your own genetics, you can change your children's genetics and your grandchildren's genetics by not smoking, eating the right thing, exercising. And we don't even know the extent of it. So this completely, honestly, it blows old school evolutionary biology out of the water, like to the point where evolutionary biology has been built on quicksand for the last 75 years.
And I guess partly because it's been built on quicksand, it's been so resistant to change, right?
Incredibly. I have consulted in 300 industries. I have never seen an industry more resistant to evolving than evolutionary biology. Okay. Now this is changing. This is changing very fast because the old school guys lost this battle 4 years ago. Dennis Noble organized a meeting at the Royal Society. 21 members of the Royal Society signed a petition and tried to get the meeting canceled. They got it to go anyway. And I was at that meeting, and it was like being Forrest Gump. It was like, I can't believe I was here when this happened, because I was hearing things that I was never accustomed to hearing from a mainstream stage in science. And a couple of the old school guys were there, and watching them backpedal and mumble excuses was just astounding to watch it happen. And ever since then, that entire crowd has refused to engage. So I've got a video on my YouTube channel where Dennis Noble says, hey, Richard Dawkins, Jerry Coyne, Daniel Dennett, any of you guys, I'll debate you any day of the week. Just name the TV station, name the radio, name the podcast, I'll go head to head. They won't even touch it. Why? Because they know they cannot possibly win. It can't be defended anymore.
Okay, so I'm going to give you another example, because you started out by talking about this is about information.
Yeah.
So the corn plant, Barbara McClintock's corn plants, or my calluses, or the granddaughter's asthma, are all direct impact on their genes or their genetic line or their own experience.
Yeah.
But then you, like the examples I remember when I learned evolution was like flightless birds on islands. Right? Somebody comes onto the ship, a snake gets off, and all of a sudden the birds are gone.
Yeah.
Now, so if I'm a flightless bird and I haven't seen a snake, there's no evolutionary pressure on me to change.
Right.
Right. So part of me wants to ask, is that the same sort of thing? Part of me wants to throw the name Rupert Sheldrake into this conversation. Where's the most useful place to go? Because I'm already really confused.
Well, okay. So you got all these flightless birds. Why are they flightless? There were no predators. So like, I've been to Begganish Island off the coast of Ireland, and birds lay their eggs in the grass. And when I went on the island, we got too close to some of the eggs. And then all of a sudden the birds were furious. And for the next half an hour, like there's like 200 birds flying around our heads and they're all mad. Okay. Well, you know, if there were minks or skunks or rats or anything else in these islands, then they would have had to lay them somewhere else, and like it wouldn't do this. Right. So it's very common with islands that you have these like protected ecosystems. Now, if the birds have enough time to adapt before they go extinct, they'll probably learn to fly. Okay, and there is no question that environmental stresses cause evolutionary events to occur, and they cause this machinery to switch on. And this actually gets you into cancer, because a couple of the speakers at the symposium are Paul Davies and his partner, Kimberly Bussey. And Paul is a physicist, and he got a call, I don't know, 10 years ago from some cancer organization. They go, "We were wondering if we could hire you to do cancer research." And he goes, "I'm a physicist. I don't know anything about cancer." He goes, "Well, that's why we're calling you. We want some fresh thinking." So they started in on this, and these two are brilliant. And they started studying some of the genetics patterns, and they said, well, some of the genetic changes that happen are very similar to stuff that we see emerging in bacteria 600 million years ago. We think cancer is a primitive response to stress. And we believe that what is happening is that the organism is getting shocked by stress, and it's rebooting into Windows safe mode, if you will. So you ever had that happen to you where your computer, restarts, and it's like, well, this is a protective mode to keep, to keep damage from happening. And then and I'm kind of synthesizing the thinking of several people here. It wakes up thinking it's a single cell instead of a member of an organism. Cancer is a disease of identity, okay, which is very teleological. It's very cognitive. And then when the body, the immune system, or chemotherapy start attacking it, it switches on its evolutionary machinery. And it's just existing like a single organism in whatever environment it found itself in. So now it starts proliferating. Then you hammer it with chemo, you kill 90% of those cells, and guess what happens to the 2% you don't kill? You get one species proliferating into 1,000 species, and now you're fighting 1,000 species of cancer, which is impossible. So and 4 months later, Aunt Sally is dead.
Okay. So what's the evidence that someone could have 1,000 different species of cancer?
So if you read a book called Genome Chaos by Henry Hang, he makes it very clear. You could go from one species to 1,000 species in a month because the cells start doing massive rearrangements of their genomes. Okay, so you get multiple kinds of polyploid, diploid, haploid. You get cells with different numbers of the parent's chromosomes. You get complete rearrangements of chromosomes. You get changes to the karyotype, which is the shape in which the chromosomes are packaged. And all of this happens at incredible speed. So if you want to go look up two terms for those who are really geeky, if you go look up chromothripsis or chromoplexy, those are massive genomic reorganizations that happen in cancer.
All right. I can't win a debate about someone who can say polyploid and chromothripsis. I'll throw in the towel. But isn't there a possibility that if you have 1,000 different species that they would fight each other?
Well, they're all competing for resources. So from that standpoint, it's Darwinian on a nanoscale. But they're actually recruiting blood vessels and tissues and nutrients away from the other organs. So you have a tumor that's saying, hey, blood vessels, hey, like all you guys, give us more. And the body they're like, okay. And they start building more blood vessels, and pretty soon, your brain's not getting enough nutrients and your tumor's getting fat. And of course, almost all of us have seen this happen with our friends and relatives.
Now, so the standard, again, I'm going to give you the textbook cancer thing that I learned, is it's a random mutation. We all have cancerous cells, cancerous processes going on inside of us all the time. And there are various things that can trip it into something clinical, like radiation, like an exposure like a bacterium or a virus. But basically, in treating cancer, we're trying to kill it, and we're trying to deal with the fact that it's randomly mutating.
Well,
right?
so there is certainly some truth to that. And like one thing we know about cancer is that many kinds of cancers, the p53 gene got deleted, which is the kill switch. It's called apoptosis. It's programmed cell death. Cells are supposed to die when certain things go wrong, or even like when an embryo is forming, and you have the webbing between the baby's fingers. That programmed cell death will kill the cells between the fingers, so the baby is born without webs. Okay, so this is a very important part of the process. But the p53 gene has gotten killed, and so there's no kill switch.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have cells that are basically immortal. Like cancer is a form of immortality, but it's willful. See, I think one of the biggest mistakes in the history of science is it's been drilled into biologists' head that natural selection is the only directional force in evolution, and natural selection has no goals. Well, both of those are wrong. So it's the cell that has goals, and the goals are not random, and the cell is an active participant in its own evolution. Okay, so when you're fighting cancer, you're fighting an intelligent entity, and it knows how to adapt. And so it's exact. If you take 100 entrepreneurs and you put them through a big giant crisis, I don't know, let's say like a pandemic, for example, okay, and let's say there wasn't any like government bailout money or anything like that. Okay, what would happen? Well, you might kill 83 of your 100 people. And what about the 17 you got left? Well, they all proliferate into all these other businesses, and one or two of them becomes a billionaire, and they might have just like kept running their bowling alley if the disaster had never happened, right? It's like this always happens, okay? Well, what I just described is fractal. It happens on every level of life that there is. All the way down to the single cell. And so cancer is, so if you assume cancer is just dumb random mutations, that's sort of like if a bomb went off at the mall down the street and you go, I think that was just random. No, it's not. You'll never, this is why we've spent $250 billion on cancer in the last 40 years, and stage 3 and 4 patients are no better now than they were in 1930.
So I wanted to ask you about the junk DNA. Right.
That term has no place in any modern informed conversation about biology. That term is totally obsolete. And frankly, I think the people that invented that word should be driving cabs for a living instead of calling themselves scientists. That is a total abdication of people's job as a scientist. Where that came from was in the 1970s. They figured out that 3% of our DNA codes for proteins, and they didn't know it, the other 97% did. And they saw that it had a bunch of repeating patterns and a bunch of what they thought was gibberish. And so they declared that it was junk.
Oh, so that's basically what I did in high school to like poetry.
Yeah. Like you didn't.
This makes no sense. This is crap.
I don't understand Steinbeck. Oh, that's just a bunch of crap. Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
Okay. And so.
Oh man, get me started. It just makes me angry.
So what does that have to do with evolutionary biology, the way you understand it, and cancer?
it's where all the interesting stuff is. Okay, so so all that 97% of our DNA that's allegedly junk, well, it is the raw material for new evolutionary changes. It is like all of the epigenetic stuff happens there. All of the transposition happens there. So, for example, there are 287,000 transposable elements that are part of our quote unquote junk DNA that are shared by humans and primates. There's a huge, I think about 8% of the human genome is retroviruses, which got inserted. Now, in a sense, you could call those junk because the humans that got those didn't intend to get them, and they probably got sick, and some of them died when they got those viruses. But when an organism has a bunch of code like that, it figures out things that it can do with it. So, for example, as far as anybody can tell, the mammalian placenta was built from codes stolen from retroviruses. Okay, so like literally true. You go look this up. All right, so like we think of viruses as these evil things. Viruses are the open source repository for evolutionary change. Okay, so we've got COVID-19 and about a jillion trillion other viruses floating around. And viruses have a very symbiotic relationship. So there's at least 10 viruses for every cell and bacteria on Earth. Like 10 to 1. Like one drop of seawater has like a million viruses in it. They're everywhere.
And the way you describe it, viruses are like just sort of pure information.
Yeah, you could say that. Right. And here's a way of thinking about, so a virus is a non-living thing. Like if it's on your kitchen table, it would just sit there forever. Okay, until it decomposed or something. It's not swimming around or doing anything like a bacterium. But when a virus makes contact with a cell, sometimes it gets in, and then all of a sudden, so here's an analogy to what it's like. So let's say you're going to a campfire tonight, and you throw your guitar in the car, and you're driving towards a campfire, and you're listening to music, and you hear "Hey Jude" on the radio, and then you hear "You Can't Always Get What You Want" by the Rolling Stones, and you get to the campfire and everybody's singing and stuff, and you go, "Hey guys, here, try this," and you go, "Hey Jude, you can't always get what you want." Okay, and you do this medley, right? And it's kind of funny, and then it becomes the joke, and everybody, and then somebody like takes it and they go to some other thing that they play your song at amateur night in a pub next Tuesday. So I got a question, Howie. Is "Hey Jude" a living thing?
Oh, now we're getting into memes, aren't we?
Yeah. Is the song "Hey Jude" alive?
Well, if we define live in terms of able to travel, replicate, reproduce, probably not like, breathe and poop, but
Right.
But it shares characteristics of living things.
Yeah. So when it's on a compact disc or a USB stick, or when it's vibrations from a speaker, it's not alive. But as soon as it gets inside of a human being, like you're saying things you wouldn't have said, you're dancing, you wouldn't have been dancing, it changes your mood. Okay, I argue that the relationship between viruses and hosts is just like the relationship between Hey Jude and you.
Mm.
Okay. And so like a song or a virus is like on the dotted line between living and non-living things. And it's just a matter of what context it's in. And notice who rewrote the song, who did the mashup.
Mm.
You did.
Yeah.
Okay. And so like there are all kinds of experiments where mice that had a virus would not get a disease, but mice that did not have a virus would get a disease because the virus would actually keep them from responding to that disease. And so viruses are actually a very important thing. I bet you that by the time this whole pandemic has run its course, that human physiology will have actually gained in functionality as a result of the fact that this happened.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So it's really interesting when you talk about like this idea of cancer as a disease of identity, and you know, so it just seems very sort of selfish in a very rational way. Like if I'm the only thing that matters, then naturally I'm going to grab everything for myself.
Yes.
And
you'll kill the host.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, you know, is humanity a cancer? Well, it depends entirely on what we choose to do. See, I argue that cancer is a matter of volition. It's like, what have these cells chosen to do? And whether we're a asset to the planet or whether we're a parasite on the planet is up to our volition. Like, I think volition is the central question in all of life. There's some scientists that want to pretend it doesn't even exist. Well, that's a materialistic position for you. Meaning that there's an I want.
Right.
Right. So I remember back in the day reading one of our favorite books, Gödel, Escher, Bach, and then following it up with Daniel Dennett's The Mind's Eye. And I was really convinced, because he's such a great writer, that I didn't exist and that my consciousness was an illusion. Right? That's kind of mainstream.
Yeah, well, I think the notion that we don't have consciousness is an illusion, right? Now, I can't, like Howie, I could live in this solipsistic world where I believe that I'm the only person with self-awareness and that you don't have it, my dog doesn't have it. Like, I could try to live that way, but I just think it's interesting that, you know, every civilization that I've ever heard of has treated human beings like they actually have choices. And it's like, well, you know, if you kill the guy, they put you on a noose because you had a choice. And we want to teach all the other creatures with choices that you don't do that, right? Like, this is like axiom number one of civilization, right? So what amuses me about people like Daniel Dennett, like I think people like Daniel Dennett are way better marketers than you and I ever were, because they can convince people of things that are so obviously untrue, right? But so it's like, well, you know, like what Daniel Dennett says something to the effect that that if you can describe all the characteristics of color, then you understand color. Like, he doesn't even, like, as though knowing how many nanometers the wavelength of red is somehow equivalent to experiencing red, right? So anyway, you're getting me onto, in our short amount of time, I probably.
Right. So you back channeled me that we have a hard stop. So can you briefly describe the conference, what you hope will come out of it, and who should attend?
So the conference is October 14 to 16 on Zoom. It's at cancerevolution.org. We have what I call blue chip renegades. And these are people from Harvard, Yale, MIT, Johns Hopkins, Oxford, MD Anderson, some of the best scientists, widely published, widely quoted, widely cited, but they disagree with the standard models. Okay, so the evolutionary biologists disagree with the standard model of evolutionary biology, and the cancer presenters, at least in part, disagree with major common assumptions in the cancer business. And we have gotten these two people together, really extraordinary people. And okay, so who should attend this? Well, you shouldn't attend if you struggle with the terminology. Like, if this conversation has been significantly over your head, I wouldn't bother. Okay, but if you're able to track what we're talking about, if you know medical terminology, or if things, I'm really sorry about that. Right. That's my hard stop reminder.
Oh, it's that damn volitional cell phone.
If you are comfortable talking about things like epigenetics, then I think this conference will be great. And I believe that we can create a sea change in the way cancer is understood, detected, and treated. And I am incredibly excited about this.
Okay. Can you say one word about treatment? Like, is there anything on the horizon based on these blue chip renegade ideas?
Well, early detection is everything. And I'll just tell you this. This has gotten me into conversations with a lot of interesting people, like way outside my normal circle. And you know what I keep hearing is, Perry, I have seen some really dark sides of the cancer industry. I have seen chemotherapy companies buying out early detection companies so that they can mothball them. Okay. The 80% of cancer money is spent on like trying to cure stage 3 and stage 4, and all of the leverage is in detecting it long before that ever happens. And that's going to be a major theme.
All right. Yeah. How much time do you have left? You got to go right now?
Like 1 minute.
1 minute. All right. So in my understanding was that early detection was a moneymaker, because you could then start treating more people who had cancers that would never progress. Like, most men will have prostate cancer, but it won't kill them. Is this a whole other conversation? Or
I don't know. I think that is a totally legitimate objection, and it could certainly be abused. And I would just caveat emptor, it's clearly that could be abused. And so there's, one thing's for sure is, like, you better love your patient more than you love your credentials and your paychecks and, and all that other stuff. So.
Gotcha. All right. So for the conference, if I can't make it or can't make all of it, replays available?
Yes, we're going to have recordings of all of it. We also have live Q&A sessions with a bunch of the different speakers a week following, and those will be on Zoom. And so if you want to go deep, you can go deep.
All right. Well, my hobby is guitar. Your hobby is curing cancer. I feel great about myself. Thanks, man.
Hey, if you play guitar and spread some joy in the world, you're going to help people not get cancer. I am sure of that.
Thanks, Jude. Perry Marshall, thank you so much.
Thank you, Howie. Take care.
Bye. All right, time for thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song, Sabali Dawn, the Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenauer.com. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Anthony Disson, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Missa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Christine Nielsen, Tina Sharp, Tina Ahern, Jennifer Kanofsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious, Michelle X, Elspeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Rhymes with Circus, Kelly Cameron, Wayne Pedersen, Janet Selby. Hi, Janet. Claire Adams, Tom Franzak, Jeanette Benham, Gil Lassert, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesen,
Kushner, Ruth Ann Funderburg, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, the equally mysterious Tracy Z, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lemus, Rebecca Hughes, Val Linneman, Rhymes with Cinnamon, Nick Harper, Martha Bergner, Susan Ahmad, Nolly Levine, the inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, the Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Sharp, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Kelly Machia, Deanne Norton, Bonnie Lynch at Plant Happy Oregon, Sabina Kurtzels, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Coble, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Shannon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Holm Hedegaard, Isa Tuzinois, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Orlikoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen Jo Crabtree, Tanya Lewis, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Valerie Peltier, Peter W. Evans, Colleen Harrison, Justin Divich, Joshua Summermeyer, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Lori Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Valerie Hummel, Emily Iaconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Picorni, Stephen Lehman, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bill Brielf, Gunter Schmidt, Marjorie Lewis, Kelly Molden, Trish Adams, Ian Kramer, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarie Hagen, Tracy Gullitz, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Rochelle Kennedy, Diana Goldman, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, Holly Butler, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Paran Ganshi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Olga Sidorowska, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owen, Sagar Nayak, Erica Piedra, Danielle Roberts, and Michael Lushton for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for now. As always, be well, my friends.